featuring test kitchen chefs Julia Collin-Davison, Bridget Lancaster, Becky Hayes, with Adam Reed in the equipment corner and Jack Bishop in the tasting lab. Discover the secrets of America's foremost food testers and tasters today on America's Test Kitchen. Today on America's Test Kitchen, Julia updates a classic recipe for shepherd's pie. Next, gadget guru Lisa reveals her favorite quirky kitchen gadgets. Then, Bridget shows Chris how to make old-fashioned corned beef at home. That's all right here on America's Test Kitchen. America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances.
And by Kohler, inspiring home chefs to create a professional-level kitchen with innovative sinks, faucets, and cook centers. Kohler.
Diamond Crystal Salt for the professional chef and those who want to cook like one. From our family to yours, fresh from the field, Foxy organic vegetables. Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. Wente Vineyards, family-owned, estate-grown, sustainably farmed since 1883. Lee Kum Kee, providing authentic Chinese sauces for the past 125 years.
Many culinary classics were invented for a very good reason. In the case of shepherd's pie, it was all about leftovers. A leftover roast, leftover gravy, and some freshly made mashed potatoes on top. But here in America, shepherd's pie has become a third-rate casserole. Ground beef, canned vegetables, canned sauce like this, and of course, you throw some mashed potatoes on top. Let's go into the kitchen with Julia and give shepherd's pie a modern makeover. I think it's time for a rant.
Oh, boy.
I haven't had a rant in a while. This one, I will join this one. This is an email we got. I need to rant about cooking shows in general. I'm not talking about our show. Am I the only one revolted by all the hair hanging over the food? And how about aprons? Must we look at cleavage? Julia Child, we miss you. We come to you from stations that also show Downton Abbey and Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. This is a family station. And let's just say it, the sexy thing on a cooking show should be the food.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's okay to have attractive people, but it's the food.
It's all about the food.
It's extremely self-serving for me, of course, to say that. But anyway, and speaking of sexy food...
shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's pie.
Oh, it's so good. Now, for the shepherd's pie we're about to make, it is a beef shepherd's pie. So we're going to start with the beef. This is 1.5 pounds of 93% lean ground beef. And the one problem we kept tripping over is that in casseroles, the ground beef comes out kind of mealy and rubbery. We found a solution, which is to add a little bit of tenderizer. So this is half a teaspoon of baking soda, which I dissolved into 2 tablespoons of water. You just want to stir this together and pour it right over the meat. This is a teaspoon of salt, and a little bit of black pepper. We're going to stir this together and let the meat sit until we're ready to make the filling, and that baking soda will act like a tenderizer and prevent the meat from getting too tough and rubbery. All right, so that is nice and combined. Now I'm going to set it aside until we're ready to make the filling, because first we're going to focus on the mashed potato topping. We tried different kinds of potatoes, but the potato that tastes the best is the russet because it has that hearty flavor. So this is 2.5 pounds of russet potatoes that have been peeled and cut into 1-inch chunks. And to cook them, we're going to put them in the pot. Fill the pot with water. You want the water to cover the potatoes by about 1 inch. There you go, that looks good. And then we're going to put it on the stove. Add a little bit of salt. This is a tablespoon of table salt. And now we're going to bring this to a boil, but then reduce it down to a gentle simmer so that the potatoes can cook through very evenly. So these potatoes have been simmering for about 8 minutes or so. And now we're going to test for doneness. You want to poke it with a paring knife, and you just don't want to feel any resistance in the center of the potato. These are perfect. All right, so we're going to turn the heat off, and we're going to drain the potatoes. I'm going to shake off any water, and then I'm going to put them back in the pot, and we're going to return it to the stove, and we're actually going to cook them for about 1 minute over low heat to really drive off any of that excess water that might be clinging. And this is a good generic tip whenever you make mashed potatoes.
Like, because extra water just makes them weightier, weighs them down?
Yeah, makes them a little starchy. All right, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to mash them right into the pot with our favorite masher. Of course, you want to make sure you get into the corners of the pot because that's where the potato chunks hide. That looks pretty good. I don't see any big chunks of potatoes left in there. So now we can add 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, which for us is pretty moderate in terms of fat amounts. This is a lot leaner of a mashed potato, of course, because it's going on a very rich, heavy casserole.
Normally we'd have a whole stick, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, this is 2.5 pounds potatoes, which is quite a bit. And now we're going to add half a cup of milk. And one trick we learned is to add an egg yolk to the topping because it'll help it to brown more evenly when it's under the broiler. Whisk this together. We'll stir this in. Plain old mashed potatoes was pretty boring. We found it important to add a little bit of interest, which we're going to do by adding some scallion greens. So we're just going to slice these thinly. And we're going to add them right to the mashed potatoes. Would you like to stir them in?
Sure. Actually, I would do this with my next batch of mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
Forgetting about the meat portion of this dish.
A little bit of
Very
salt,
good, though.
a little bit of pepper. All right, so I'm just going to stir in our seasonings, and that's it for the topping.
Very good.
We're going to cover this and set it aside while we focus on the filling.
Okay.
So this is 2 teaspoons of vegetable oil in this 10-inch skillet. So while that oil is heating up, I'm going to chop up a few mushrooms, which will add a nice meatiness to the dish. I'm going to start by slicing them thinly. This is 4 ounces of white mushrooms. I'm just going to rough chop them. And then just continually running my knife over them till they're a nice fine chop. There are our mushrooms, and that oil looks pretty good.
Very close, yes.
So we're going to add the mushrooms right to the pan, along with a finely chopped onion and a little bit of salt and pepper, which of course is good seasoning, but it will help bring out the moisture in both the onion and the mushrooms. All right, so those mushrooms have really cooked down, and I'm starting to see some nice browning around the edge of the pan. So we're going to add some tomato paste. This is a tablespoon of tomato paste and 2 minced garlic cloves. And again, we're going to cook this for a minute or 2 until the tomato paste starts to brown and it starts to form more fond on the bottom of the pan. And it's that developing of fond on top of fond that really develops a meaty flavor without having to brown the meat. All right, so you can see that tomato paste had made a nice fond on the bottom of the pan. We're going to add a little bit of Madeira. That's 2 tablespoons of Madeira. And with that, I'm going to start to scrape up some of those brown bits so that they don't burn. And let that Madeira juice so it doesn't taste so raw. We're going to add a little bit of flour. This is 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. This is a thickener for the sauce. Now the flour will also start to brown and turn a little golden, which is also good for flavor. So now the flour has really absorbed all that liquid and fat that was in the pan. You can see it's starting to form yet another fond on the bottom of this pan. And so now we're going to add the broth, and this is beef broth, just 1.25 cups of beef broth. And again, I'm going to scrape up the brown bits around the edges on the bottom of the pan, so we want all that flavor right in the sauce.
I think we're done.
Here we are. We're going to add just a smidge of Worcestershire sauce, just 2 teaspoons. Again, adds a hearty flavor. 2 sprigs of thyme and a bay leaf. Now we're going to add the carrots. And of course, these we chopped pretty finely because we want them to cook through in the short amount of time that it's going to take for the beef to cook through, and that was 2 carrots. All right, so now it is time to add the meat, and this meat, again, has been sitting aside with the baking soda, getting nice and tender. And we're going to pinch off pieces of meat and just gently put them on top. We're actually not going to stir it in. We're going to let it poach very gently on top of the stew, but underneath the lid, if you wouldn't mind. And we're going to turn this down to low, let it simmer gently, that way it doesn't get tough. And it takes about 10 to 12 minutes for this meat to cook through, but about halfway through I'm going to go in with some forks and turn the meat over and break apart any big pieces that I see. But it's this gentle cooking that will prevent it from being tough and rubbery.
So now it's time to check in with our gadget girl, Lisa McManus.
Chris, we test a lot of quirky gadgets here in the test kitchen, and sometimes we're surprised by how great they really are. First one is the Progressive International Microwave Rice Cooker. Has a lid that's 2 parts, it's easy to clean. Has a cup for the rice and water and a little paddle. And you just pour your rice and water in there, put on this lid, latch it, and pop that in the microwave. It's from Progressive International, and it's $8.99. Now here's something that I just think is the coolest thing. You know when you print out recipes or you have them on a little index card and you're trying to prop them up around the kitchen to cook from? Solves the problem. It's called the Recipe Rock by Architect. It's this heavy little base with a strong magnet inside and a steel ball. Just sticks right on there. You can put your recipes in there. And how cool is that? This holds up to 10 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper. The Recipe Rock by Architect is $9.99, and it really works. Now, this is something that we thought was kind of interesting, mini bundt pans. When you're cooking for two, or you're trying to practice portion control, or you're going to give little cakes as a gift, mini bundt pans are a great idea. But a lot of them just make the saddest, lumpiest, dumpiest little cakes. We wanted a really perfect little shape and a crisp, distinct design, and we found that with our winner. This is the Nordic Ware Platinum Anniversary Bundlet Pan. It has a good, sturdy construction, a non-stick coating, and these nice extended handles that are easy to handle. It's $40 from Nordic Ware. And then here's something that I personally love so much I went out and bought it, and I've been using it at home. This is the Progressive International Mini Colander. It holds 3.5 cups, but it collapses down to just 1 inch for storage. And here's the really cool part. The bottom comes off. It covers the holes, but it has a little base that pops on. And you can use that when you're washing berries. You know how you really want to get them clean. So you can flood the bowl under the sink. Really rinse them clean. And then you just pop that base right off. The water drains right out. Now that oval shape is great because it helps you when you're pouring out the berries if you're going to put them into something else, or you can put it right on the counter and it won't drip. The Progressive International Collapsible Mini Colander is just $6. It's a real bargain. So Chris, these are our favorite little gadgets in the test kitchen.
So this meat's been cooking for about 10 minutes. Oh, that smells good. Now I'm going to take out the thyme and the bay leaf. This is 2 teaspoons of cornstarch, which I'll dissolve into 2 teaspoons of water to make a little slurry. Then we're going to add this right to the simmering skillet. The meat really released a little bit of fat and a lot of juices that didn't really incorporate into the sauce. And the only way to get it to reabsorb into the sauce is with a little cornstarch. And that is it for the filling. Now, to spread the topping, which is quite thick, over this rather soupy casserole, we found a good trick. Use a piping bag or a zipper lock bag. So I'm just going to fill this bag with our mashed potatoes. And much like a pastry bag, you want to fold the top down, and then you can use your hand through the plastic wrap to help get the potatoes off the spatula. So now you just want to sort of close the bag around your hand and give it a twist. And just cut off the corner, and now you can evenly just pipe the potatoes right on top of the skillet. Go back and fill in any areas that you might have missed and go around the edge again. So now that we have the potatoes evenly on top of the filling, just gonna spread them smooth and then make a little bit of a wavy design with a fork, which not only looks pretty, but it also gives some valleys and peaks so that when you run this under the broiler, you get a nice browning effect. So now we're gonna run this under the broiler till it gets a nice golden halo on top. So it's been about 10 minutes since this has been under the broiler. Oh, and she's a beauty. Nice and golden on the top. So we're gonna let the casserole cool before we dig into it. So I've been letting this cool for about 10 minutes so it won't be too hot when we taste it.
Topping does look great.
Isn't it beautiful?
Yeah. I'm a big supporter of meat and potatoes, and this sort of brings it to a new level. I mean, it's the perfect combination. There's a reason people talk about meat and potatoes. Oh, boy.
That filling is so good. And that meat is just so tender.
This is like a big, comfy leather armchair. You just sink right back into the potatoes, you know? It's that good. So great shepherd's pie does not start with the meat. It starts with vegetables and aromatics and tomato paste building a fond in the bottom of the skillet. The meat was actually soaked in a bit with baking soda to make it tender. Cooked that with the beef stock for a bit, and then we added the mashed potatoes on top. They had scallions in them, which are a nice touch, into a broiler to finish. And there you have it from America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, an all-new version of shepherd's pie. Particularly delicious. One of my all-time favorite recipes to make at home is corned beef. It's very different than what you can buy at the supermarket. So, of course, you use the brisket. The brisket is this cut here under the chuck, has a lot of flavor. In fact, we have the entire brisket right here. It's usually cut into two parts. There's the point cut, which is this cut here. It's very uneven in thickness. And there's the flat cut, which is flatter and more even in thickness. This has a lot of flavor, has a little more fat, but we usually suggest you buy the flat cut because that's easier to find. So how did people use to preserve this cut? Well, they used to corn it. Why did they call it corning? Well, they simply salted it. They were very large, coarse crystals of salt, which referred to as corn crystals, and they salted it, and as a result, moisture came out of the meat. The lower the moisture, the less likely bacteria is to grow. Of course, over time, this became a commercial phenomenon, and if you go to the supermarket, you're all familiar with this corned beef. It has a very odd color. Why is that? Well, you can corn with regular sodium chloride, but there are hundreds of salts out there, one of which is sodium nitrate. That's what's usually used. You put it on the meat, it eventually turns into sodium nitrite, which is very good at preventing botulism. Sodium nitrite breaks down to nitric oxide, which reacts with the myoglobin in the blood, and that gives you this very strange color. So let's go into the kitchen with Bridget to figure out how to make really great corned beef at home. I have to say I'm very excited about this next recipe.
I am too.
Because it's our people, that is people who didn't have a lot to eat except meat and potatoes. They had to find a way to preserve meat.
Sure.
And they ended up with a system for preserving and cooking it that actually made it much better.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I love
so-
corned beef. So we're gonna make corned beef and cabbage, or as it's called in New England boiled dinner, or as we say here in New England, dinner. All right, so that's what we're gonna make today. Now, you can't make corned beef without brisket, and this is a flat cut brisket we're using, and you wanna look for one that's about 4 to 6 pounds. Most brisket comes with a fat cap attached, and we're gonna leave a little bit on there. But where it's quite thick, we're just going to take a nice sharp knife and trim it until it's about 1/4 inch. We don't wanna take too much of it off, because that's gonna help to flavor the meat. And flat cut especially can be a little bit lean. All right, so next, we're gonna dry corn our beef. We're actually just going to use 1/2 cup of kosher salt, and that for a 4 to 6 pound brisket is not a lot. We're gonna add a tablespoon of dried thyme right in there, and 2 1/4 teaspoons of ground allspice. It's actually got a little bit of a clove flavor, a little bit of a nutmeg flavor, so it does triple duty. We've got some paprika here, it's 1 1/2 teaspoons, and a couple of bay leaves, crushed right in there. Now, before I mix all this up, I've got a tablespoon of peppercorns. So I do want to crack the peppercorns so we can get some of their flavor more readily into the corning mixture. The best way to do that is just take a skillet, rock the skillet back and forth, and you can hear them cracking like popcorn. So I'm going to add this right into my bowl. There we go. All right, and just mix everything together. Now we're going to apply the spice rub to the brisket, but before I do that, I'm going to take a metal skewer and poke a bunch of holes all over the brisket. That's going to allow the corning mixture to really penetrate the meat very easily. 30 times on each side should do it. So now we can go ahead and apply the spice rub. So I'll start on the bottom side. Just start rubbing in that mixture. Make sure to get it all over. Got here a 2-gallon bag. Open that up for me. And this is what I mean by dry corning. All right, let's get a little bit of those spices in there. Rub them in there. Just want to get all of the air out. We're going to let this sit right in a 9 by 13 baking dish. Now, I do want to weigh it down and compact the meat, and that's going to give it that really traditional corned beef kind of texture where everything's compacted and it slices beautifully. So you can use a couple of heavy cans, or if you happen to be working on your patio, a couple of bricks, and I am going to put a towel in here. So I'm going to put this in the refrigerator, and I want to leave it in there for a minimum of 5 days, but 7 days is even better, and during that time, all those corning spices and the salt will season the meat. And once a day, I'll go in there and I'll flip the bag over and make sure it's seasoning evenly. Okay. All right, Chris, we've got a corned beef here that's been sitting in the fridge for 7 days, and we're ready to move on. All right, so there's a lot of spices on the outside. We just want to get rid of those exterior spices. So I'm just going to rinse this quickly. All right, so that looks good. So now, stand clear there, Chris. I'm gonna bring it over to this Dutch oven. Thank you. Go ahead and put that right there. Now, we wanna cover it with water by about 1 inch. And we'll push this down in there. And this is basically going to be our braising liquid. All right, so we're gonna bring it up to a full boil, and then once it's there, we'll cover the pot, then we'll reduce the heat to medium-low. Now, once it's there, we want it to simmer nice and gentle for about 2 to 3 hours until it's really nice and tender. All right, so it's been a few hours. It's time to check on that brisket. All right, so I wanna test it, see if it's done. So I'm just gonna use a metal skewer, and you can see it just goes in and out like butter. Now transfer this to a baking dish. Oh, it just wants to fall apart. That's a good sign.
It started out very tough, so.
That's
yes.
exactly right. All right, so now we want to keep this warm, but we also want to let the meat rest. So I'm going to take about 1 cup of the liquid and pour it right over the top. It's going to keep it nice and moist. So I'm going to tint it with foil. Cover it nice and tight. We're going to put this in a low oven, so 200 degrees. We're going to put it in there and keep it warm. And it's actually going to start to rest while it's in the oven. It's going to become even more tender. All right, so in the meantime, we can go ahead and add our vegetables right in there. 1.5 pounds of carrots. So we've got 1 pound of rutabaga and 1.5 pounds of small potatoes. So let's make sure we submerge these in the liquid, and that liquid is going to flavor these vegetables. It's going to be beautiful. All right, so we're going to put the lid on, and we're going to simmer the vegetables for about 7 minutes. Now, that's not nearly enough time to cook them through, but it's enough time to get them a head start on our next vegetable.
Okay.
All right, Chris, you can't have corned beef and cabbage without the cabbage. So we want to cut this head of cabbage into 8 wedges, and we want to cut through the core, and that core is going to help keep the wedges intact. All right, so there's a couple of ways that you can cut through cabbage. You can go at it with a knife like this, but I think sometimes a bread knife is great because you can get a much better grip, even just to start through the cabbage. Just that first cut makes it nice and easy. Then you can always switch over to your other knife. Just straight through the core, just like that. And then we want to go at an angle again through the core. All right, so that is that. So let's put these right into the pot. I'm going to go ahead and crank up the heat too because we want to bring it back up to the boil. And then we're going to simmer it covered again over medium-low until all the vegetables are nice and tender. And that's going to take another 13 to 18 minutes. All right, so it's time to eat. Let's get that corned beef out of the oven. Okay, and we are done cooking our vegetables. So this should be nice and hot. All right. Oh, that is so tender. It's just falling apart. Now, for really, really tender slices, we want to cut against the grain. Nice and thin slices. Oh, look at that. It's just falling apart, which is exactly what we want. We are ready to eat. Oh, the cabbage is so tender. Potatoes, carrots, all the yummy stuff. So final step, I'm going to take some of this beautiful broth and pour it all over everything. There you go. Now we've got some greeny mustard and horseradish cream there. Both of them nice and tangy. It's going to cut through the beef.
First of all, we don't need a steak knife for this, right? I mean, you just needed a butter knife.
You don't really need a fork. You could just use a spoon for this beef.
It has some salt flavor, but also has that allspice in there as well, which is really nice.
Love that.
It's incredibly tender. And I keep saying the word clean, but it has a very clean taste to it, you know?
The brisket taste comes through, definitely. Vegetables are cooked nicely. They're not overcooked. I know.
I think homemade corned beef proves the old ways are best.
Definitely.
I've been saying that for a very long time.
It's true here.
Now, this is a fabulous recipe, and it makes sense for today as well. It's very simple, flat-cut brisket with salt and some spices. Weigh it down in the fridge for 5 or 6 days. Turn it once a day. And simmer it in water for 2.5 to 3 hours. Keep it warm in the oven. And cook your vegetables in 2 batches right in that seasoned broth. So from America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, a terrific recipe for homemade corned beef. You can get this recipe, all the recipes from this season, our tasting and testing results. Watch selected episodes of this show at our website at americastestkitchentv.com. I mean, this is just, it's practical, it's frugal, it's delicious.
I'm going to enjoy
it's
my
easy.
rutabaga.
Yeah.
Let us help with dinner tonight. Visit our website anytime for free access to this season's recipes, taste tests, and equipment ratings, or to watch current season episodes. Log on to americastestkitchentv.com.
The Complete America's Test Kitchen TV show cookbook includes every recipe, tasting, and testing from all 13 years' shows, including this season. With over 850 recipes, it's our most comprehensive collection ever. The cost is $29.95, $10 less than the cover price. You will also receive this 4-DVD set, a $39.95 value, featuring all 26 episodes from this season at no additional charge. To order, call 1-800-831-8315 or order online at americastestkitchentv.com.
America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances. Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. From our family to yours, fresh from the field, Foxy organic vegetables. Kohler. Diamond Crystal Salt, the gourmet choice. Wente Vineyards. And by Lee Kum Kee.